Hello and welcome to Talking About It. I'm one of your hosts, John Griffith, and
I'm JC Alvarez, and thanks for joining us. And if you're like me, you're a huge comic book fan, and certainly have been a fan all your life. You've probably been following Marvel Comics and noticed that they're sort of like in a little dark world right now. And if you're a fan of DC Universe Comics, then you know they've been under crisis for a while. We're joined today by a group of gentlemen that are revolutionizing the whole comic book genre. We have with us Achilles Yeldell, Gary Price, and Ray Crisera. What a chore. We didn't think I was going to get that out, but I did. And
who are you?
And I am JC Alvarez. Yeah. And you gentlemen are independent comic book publishers. Pronto Comics is the line, if you would. And it's a really innovative idea because it's kind of like giving a new voice and sort of a great sort of venue for aspiring artists and writers. And why don't you tell us a little bit about it? Because you are the publisher and sort of like the brainchild, if you would, of this venture.
Okay. Well, we originated out of a course that is called the Comic Experience class, which is taught by Andy Schmidt. And so in that course, you have a class that was being taught by an editor from DC Comics, and he was teaching art. And then you have an editor from Marvel who was teaching writing. And so the goal of those classes was actually to kind of bridge the gap between people learning about how to be part of the comic book industry and actually getting a job.
Right.
But it's a 6-week course, so when those classes ended, all of the students from each of those courses, we got together just to kind of to stay in touch with each other. We worked on one particular project, which is this one, the Anthology.
Mm-hmm.
As we all worked on that together, and we had writers and artists pairing up, depending on what their chemistry and their dynamic was like, then the experience was so rewarding for us, and we all learned so much from each other that we decided to go ahead and continue to work together, and that's where Pronto Comics came up.
You know, what I really love about this, and what we always have had the opportunity to do here, is that we always have introduced new artists from all walks of life, whether
Right.
it's music, literary, film. And it's just really great as a comic book fan to sort of like now see it coming from the bottom up. Because if you look at, you know, when Superman and Batman were being created, this is exactly how these guys got together. Bob Kane and these guys, this is how they did it. You know, hey, I like the way you write. I like the way you draw.
let's get together.
Let's get together. You know, it's like, you know, this, I just made up this guy with a really cool cape. What do you think he's going to do? And here you guys are now sort of like taking that power back and moving comics sort of like into a new direction.
Well, when it comes to comics, as far as an art form, whether it be for literary stuff or drawing and things like that, it's very unique in that you have writers and artists which would otherwise work alone. If you're writing novels, you work alone. If you're a painter, you, for the most part, are working alone. But here you have this collaboration, and therefore, one person will motivate the other one will help learn. But in this industry, it just doesn't lend itself for people to meet each other in a very natural way. So you had a lot of artists who didn't have any stories to write, so they were trying to write their own. You have a lot of writers who don't know how to draw and were trying to draw on their own.
So not all writers are necessarily really good comic book artists.
Right.
Well, exactly.
Creative energy comes out in different ways.
Absolutely. I write and draw, but I prefer to write much more so. And so then you had this whole thing where there's a big need on both parties to go ahead and get together and work. And so that's where it really helps take the loneliness out of what could otherwise be a pretty like solitary artistic experience.
And here you brought two of your cohorts, if you would, that worked on this project. Gary, you're an illustrator.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And how long have you been sort of wanting to get into the genre?
Well, as long as I can remember, I've been, drawing and just wanting to break in. And we were talking about earlier today about how hard it is when you're just pitching to, like you mentioned, the big two, Marvel and DC. And, you go and you keep working and you talk to them, but it's kind of a long shot. And then there's what else is there? When this gives you a chance to meet up with other people that are trying to break in, as an artist, you need that, especially when you're trying to find something, you're trying to work on it, and you have no feedback. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little small crew of people that are into comics. It's getting bigger and bigger.
Well, it's a huge phenomenon. Yeah. I mean, comics have really sort of like become an art form on their own and really have taken off and really permeated into the pop culture world. And really as what's happening here with Pronto Comics is it's really sort of like giving you experience to sort of already have a resume in hand as you're working. So you're sort of like already working your craft. getting the attention of the big
Yeah.
two out there.
Yeah,
Right.
and getting feedback from people that are willing to, let you know what they think of it, rather than just looking at it. No, that's good enough. You know. What I mean? So,
And it's also collaborative because it's like that's the interesting thing about the comic world, because as a writer, Ray, it's like you have to come up with a script that your publisher has to look at, your editor has to look at, and sort of like fan out how the story's going to go, and then you sort of present that to your artists and you collaborate together. Because a lot of people are sort of like not clear on how comics are engendered, and
Right, the whole process.
And it's really close almost to filmmaking. When you really kind of break it down, it's almost like a filmmaking process. So how does that work? Like when you come up with a writing concept or a script, you then take it to?
It's funny that you said that, because I've told friends that I've been working with this group, and we're trying to create our own comics, and I'm writing 4 comic books, and they're like, yeah, wow, I always I'm amazed by people that can draw, and they assume because I'm writing comics that I'm drawing. It's like, well, no,
putting the little balloon words. That's what I do. Yeah.
It's like, no, I can't really. You have to have an artist, and it's funny. I'm pretty new to writing, and I actually had taken these classes initially to see what was involved in me getting into comic book editing, and but I've really fallen in love with writing, and it's great in that you can put something on a page and you describe it, and you hope that it's something good, but then when you collaborate with an artist and you actually see it, and a lot of these artists that we have working with us are amazing in that not only can they draw, they ink their own stuff, they can color their own stuff, and they do the lettering for it too, because they're just so savvy. I'm not technically savvy like that, but so
But you use a typewriter, don't you, to do your writing?
Exactly. Yeah.
Danielle
Have to
Steele
change
still
the
uses
ribbon
one of those,
and,
those old things, and I'm like, yeah, what up with that? But you use a
Right.
typewriter. I would hope.
I can actually use a computer, but
Oh, good.
But as far as like lettering and coloring and none of that. So this whole experience was great. We took the writing class, and I was hoping I could just team up with one of the writers to like kind of push each other to actually put stuff on paper. And this was even better because we actually produced our own anthology of work, and we all have our own calling card, and we're all pushing that calling card. So you have 15 or however many. How many?
We're 22 people now.
Well, 22 people now, but in the initial anthology,
Oh, that was 15.
15 people all pushing that anthology. So if they get it in front of somebody, they're going to see not only their work, but they're going to see all of our work too, which is great.
Because what we have here is that first publication that you guys all worked on. This is actually a larger version.
Yes.
It's a lot. We don't want anyone out there who's like Satan's going like, damn, that's not going to fit on my shelf.
I can't
That's not
read
going to
that
fit in my
on the shelf."
comic book box. It's like I'm going to ruin it. But this is actually the anthology you guys worked on to initially get Pronto up and running. And tell us a little bit about it. Like, what's the because I know it's a series of stories, right?
It's a collection of stories. They're all 6 pages long, and the theme was bounty hunters. So we initially had a meeting with the writers, and so with the writers, that's who chose the bounty hunter theme. And then it could be any story you wanted as far as like bounty hunting goes. And then there was like a meet and greet where the writers, but then were in a position where they had to not only have like a script, but they had to pitch their story to the artist. So if there's an artist that you really like, you have to go ahead and convince him that your story is going to be more, that it'll be better, it'll be funnier, it'll have more artistic opportunities for them.
So they can collaborate on it.
So they could collaborate. So if you have
It's
3
like comic
people,
book speed dating.
and it was because at that meet and greet, I was going to draw my own story because I just couldn't handle the pressure of all of that meet and greet. But it was kind of hard for people to initially get that match going. This was the kind of thing where there's certain muscles that you have to exercise in order to make it in the industry. And for some writers, it was very tough to go ahead and approach an artist, period. To just go ahead and talk to them about their stuff, never mind doing it in a competitive fashion. And some of them didn't want to seem too like an egomaniac, so they kind of like, they downplayed their own story, which, only works against them.
Right.
So, but then they learned. So then the second time around, when we were doing for our second anthology, which we're in the process of now, it's a whole different ballgame because now people are like, I saw what you did with that guy's story. I want you to do mine. And people, it was a learning experience for everybody as far as how to get together. So that's where you have the 10 stories that are framed by bookends that Gary was kind enough to also illustrate along with his own story.
That's a really fantastic point to make, because it's sort of like, as independent artists and as people trying to break into the industry, you often think that your options are really, really limited. I mean, for comic book artists and writers, the way to go nowadays to get your work seen is usually at conventions, right? You go in and you get seen by the big guns. They're sitting there. You show them your stuff. They take a second, and then they they either exit or nix it, and or tell you they're interested in checking out your stuff.
Well, it used to be that way, but more and more with conventions, even the ones that do say that they'll have portfolio reviews, the quality, it's much more competitive now.
Oh, yeah,
So it used to be that pretty much if you were going to go ahead and have a portfolio review, go to these conventions, you were going to go to some big city, and it was just a very small amount of people. But now people can email, from Alaska, their portfolio, and all the person has to do is just click on the link for that person's website.
Right.
So every artist now is competing with everybody in the world, as opposed to just the people who happen to be, let's say, in New York. Right. So the competition for that is a lot harder. I think the biggest lesson that we learned as a group was our definition of success was based on working for Marvel or DC. Generally speaking, that's what people kind of saw it as. Either it was just a hobby, like, oh, I'll write this little script, or I'll go ahead and, or I want to work for Marvel or DC.
Right.
But as time went by, the feeling that, some of us got going to Midtown Comics and seeing our anthology,
which is
on
where
the
I get all
shelf.
my stuff on 41st and where is it, 7th, 8th? 41st between 7th and 8th
Exactly.
in Midtown Manhattan.
I think it's 40th, right?
40th. 40th in
I can't
Midtown
remember.
Manhattan between 7th and 8th.
But they
I want my 30% discount now.
But so when you go to that shop, or some people took it to different comic book stores, Cosmic Comics, whatever, and like to have the feeling of seeing that, just for me, the first thing that I gave Gary to draw for me, when I saw my script illustrated by someone else, that kind of feeling of success, a lot of us just didn't think of that.
Right.
But that's all it takes to be in the industry, is to go ahead and print up your own thing, you
Right.
put it, and whether it's on a shelf or you're just selling it online.
I would think that,
Yeah.
that doing it yourself gives you more open-ended creativity rather than working for one of the two, not just companies, but major corporations.
Right.
Absolutely.
What's nice too is you talk about conventions and how you go to them and you got one day, it's once a year in New York, or you go to San Diego, you're pitching to these guys, they look at it for a little, and like that's where we met at a convention,
Right.
showed our work, and then normally it would be over with. You go home and wait another 6 months or 3 months till the next convention. But that's what's nice is, every month we're getting together, we're talking on the phone, sending emails, collaborating, and getting feedback, which we didn't get before. You had to wait forever.
Well, you're published, so it's kind of like because people can get this.
Yeah.
People can order this, and people can check out your work themselves, and how can, and I know it's an interesting process as far as like, because when you were describing to me how people get this, it's really kind of genius, the whole new process. But if somebody wanted to check out your work, and if someone who's watching, how can they pick up a copy of the anthology?
Well, if you go to prontocomics.com on that website, there's a link, a few links there that will direct you to where you can buy it. But I know at lulu.com, if you search for Pronto Comics, you'll see the anthology. At Midtown, midtowncomics.com, if you type in For a Price, which is the title of the anthology,
Right.
I think that's it'll pop up. So you can order it online. Lulu is great because you can download it. Download it in black and white, and
Which
you
is-
can download it in color.
Which is
Okay.
really kind of interesting, because comics are now also moving into this sort of like digital realm. Like people because people are worried about advertising kind of like going the way of the dinosaur.
Right.
So now you guys are also on that cutting edge, because you're already downloadable.
Right.
Yes, it's tricky for the industry, because the industry's afraid of it going the same way as the music industries. Where if someone is able to download,
Where there's a will, there's a way.
if you're able to download someone's comic, what's to stop you from downloading it and forwarding it to all of your other friends, so that they don't have to go ahead and purchase it that way? So as much as that hurts, the potential for that can hurt the big two, Marvel and DC. It benefits all of the up-and-coming people who want to go ahead and do their own thing. A lot of people don't realize where we were dreaming of, like my dream going into Pronto Comics was I wanted to work for Marvel or DC. But it's no different than when you decide that you have, let's say, a movie, and you want to have, 20th Century Fox go ahead and produce it. You get all that money, but then they own all of the stuff. They're going to tell you who the cast is going to be and all of that. So
This is yours.
so this is ours, and a lot of people didn't realize that. Yeah, when you work for DC, for Marvel, there's so many guidelines.
There's a framework and
There's a
guidelines.
framework, and it works for them. I'm not knocking it, but truly, for a lot of us, that we realized, well, I would have had to really conform to their way. I actually prefer doing it this way.
Right,
For me, anyway.
Because you guys have the creative freedom. And before I forget, we are live.
Yes.
And if anyone wants to call in,
Our phone number is 718-460-9802. Any questions, comments? Say what you mean, don't say it mean, and give us a call.
and it's really a great. I mean, I'm all for the independent artist, and I just think it's really fantastic that something like this exists. Because I mean, growing up with being a cartoonist myself, because my father was a cartoonist, and for the longest time I was kind of moving into this direction before I found television. Or if television found me, however you want to picture it. But it's sort of like, it's I always imagine what my comic books would be like, and you guys are creating what you want.
JC, we always need artists, man. We always need artists.
Well, but it's, this is phenomenal. It's just so inspiring to like see that it's being done and it's happening. Because I mean, it's like there are going to be so many people out there that want to do this or like, have gotten those rejection letters from the big guys and feel like, their arm's been cut off at it.
Right, but you have to persevere, and if you love it, you do it. Plain and simple. If you love it, you do it.
And this is an example of loving what you do and going for it. Now, this one was about bounty hunters, and you're working on a second one.
What's the through line on that?
The second one is called Kicked. It's about a superhero named Captain Awesome, and each of the short stories are one of the sidekicks that had a bad experience with him. So this.
Oh, I could write that.
So it's pretty much like the equivalent of a serial dater, somebody who just goes ahead and just has one disastrous, short-term relationship after another. And so it's framed around like an intervention where they're telling this one sidekick, you don't want to be with Captain Awesome. So the story. And it as a project, we've learned a lot from the first anthology. I think the pair-ups that we have now are a bit more, have a stronger dynamic. And people feel more confident. Once we saw the published work in our hands, I think for a lot of people it made what was like a hobby or just like a childhood dream kind of a thing. I think it made them take themselves a lot more seriously.
It made it real.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to, because I know Gary's in here, right?
Yes, this is Gary.
This is Gary's
he
work.
did the bookend.
That's Gary's work there, which is
But
he's
Gary's
clearly very good.
now Gary's an interesting case because he drove 3 hours from Pennsylvania to be
In
here
the
today.
blizzard.
In the blizzard.
God bless him.
And any time that he manages to make it to any of our events, it's driving 3 hours. But it
That's
just goes to show
dedication.
that a lot of the stuff that he does from home, where you don't have to be physically present to be part of something like this or to start your own thing. There's so many communities online that people have.
Right, that's fantastic, and it's sort of like, and how this is the initial piece with 12 artists altogether participated on it. 12.
It's
How many people put this guy together? This whole.
Here's the table of contents. So
Oh,
there we go.
brilliant, okay.
So it's there's 9 stories. Yeah, my story didn't make the cut, so there's
Oh
9.
man.
Yes.
Well, you had to
I
put the
cut
whole
it.
thing together, so it's kind of like
Exactly.
you get a party.
So with when you have the 9 stories, there were some that were. This was written by Jarrell Lonesome and then was illustrated by Ken Frederick. But then there's someone like Gary who wrote and drew his own story.
What's really fantastic also is that even new artists tend to pay homage to like the classics, and you look at a lot of the work that these artists have done, and it kind of takes you back to like a lot of the familiar comic book artists that kind of paved the way.
Yeah. Who stands out in your mind as personal inspirations?
Well, as far as writing goes, Alan Moore and Chris Claremont, Mark Wolfman, they do a lot of stuff that's character driven. So for me as a writer, those were strong influences.
I'd have to say, I mean, I know a lot of people get mad if you're in the comic industry, but I grew up in the 90s, so I have to love Jim Lee's stuff. And everyone,
wow.
huge fan-ups, but
He's very good.
it's
very good.
Frank Miller, the way he changed things. Alex Ross is just unbelievable. He does the paintings of superheroes, and that's a big influence. But
And look, there's girls.
Well, and for this particular story that's illustrated, the writer James was not able to find an artist, and he got so frustrated, and he wanted his story to be told that he drew it himself, and did a spectacular job with that.
That's phenomenal.
But Ray, you're
That's
going to say your
Ray, your
influences?
inspirations?
You know, I read a lot as a kid, and I've in the modern day today. So I really liked Roger Stern when I was growing up, and Marv Wolfman, you mentioned, Jim Shooter. And today, some of the writers I really like, well, from back in the day and today, is Peter David is great, and Gail
Peter
Simone.
David's funny.
He's hilarious.
He's got a great sense of humor
Great
with the
sense
stuff
of
he
humor.
does.
And he writes all kinds of stuff. He writes
Yeah.
for TV and film, and he's done
And he's the guy that put
novels.
Hulk on the map.
Yeah, it's true.
He turned
had
Hulk
a
into a
resurgence there.
character that people loved and
Yeah.
stuff.
Brian Bendis is a big influence today. He writes like everything
Everything.
Marvel's in.
Everything
and,
Marvel.
Gail Simone, I really like over at DC. I think she writes really good character stuff. I think she's awesome.
And that's the thing. There are so many lady artists and writers in comics because everyone tends to associate as comic books being something that's just all for guys. And it's so funny that there's so many talented female artists and writers out there that have added to the genre and really put a spin on superhero things that are mainly oftentimes very testosterone driven.
Yeah.
And it's often really cool to me, like when I get my weekly fix, when I go get my comics, when I see girls and I see what girls are buying, I'm always like into like what girls are buying. And they're like buying Spider-Man and like they're like reading what guys are reading, and it's kind of like it's I'm just saying that because you guys can, if you think you're not going to pick up chicks at the comic book shop, you're so wrong. You're so wrong. Yeah, it's really fantastic. Now, what's really also exciting is with comics is how much. What is this?
That's a long story. I don't know.
This was one of the things that happens when you work from far away.
Like, what the hell?
Gary didn't realize that when we were putting
He's
this
putting
together.
a personals page together in his comic book.
He thought everybody was doing that. So
I thought it was gonna have a photo. Here's my information. You want to
Try to hook
hire
up.
me? Next thing I know, it's all covers for their 5 pages, and it was a pretty big joke when it came out.
Oh,
'cause
that's
I did
brilliant.
Not know.
yeah, he's the only picture that.
It's a bit of a running joke.
Yeah, wow, Gary.
So now whenever I send any work, I like to make sure there's a big headshot.
Good old
in
Gary
there.
That story
Price.
you just passed was drawn by Achilles Yeldo.
Oh.
Well, and for anyone that's not.
And he's very graphic, apparently.
Well, I didn't write the story,
Oh,
but
okay.
I drew it. But for anyone that is not, let's say, computer savvy, like I don't know how to color on computer. And I definitely didn't know at this time. So this was actually done in Magic Marker.
Oh, wow.
And I was so, at the time, self-conscious about that. But the colors actually ended up popping out a little bit more because of the way the color was done. And for the story that was being told here, it was fine.
It served the purpose of the genre. Of the
Right,
story,
but we make it a big point with Pronto that we take everyone as they are, and we don't assess them by where they're trying to go, where we want them to go. It's like, what do you want this to be a hobby, or do you want this to be, your first step into like working professionally? Do you want to just do black and white stuff? Do you want to like, however it is that you want to work it is fine. If you want to do all your stuff in watercolor, because there's one of us that likes to use watercolors, then it's fine. It's however you want to express yourself, and that's the benefit of being an independent company.
Right.
That's brilliant. Now, comic books and certainly graphic novels have permeated the pop culture. Just how we look at comic books has changed so much in pop culture. I mean, you can't throw a stick without hitting a superhero character in some kind of way, shape, or form, whether it's on television or in movies and stuff. I mean, they're just everywhere. Why do you guys think all of a sudden there's been this surgence? I mean, it just didn't happen overnight, but there's been this real surgence that, superheroes are really relevant and not just, the comic book genre has become really relevant in pop culture.
Well, I think it went with the change of the ideology that superheroes were these noble, heroic figures, and then you have these like one-dimensional bad guys that were just out to rob a bank and steal money. And then once they saw the feedback, when you create these really flawed characters, like Wolverine has been around for a long time, and he's certainly very flawed, but nowadays people don't want their heroes to be something perfect, something a little bit out of their reach or unrealistic. So that's
a
why
little bit better.
Yeah. So Batman Begins was a very different kind of Batman,
Right.
the one that Michael Keaton was playing. Back in the day, where it's just very like he's just one way. So I think that things like Watchmen and all of those movies, and even in the comics themselves, people want flawed characters.
Well, comics are certainly like modern day mythologies, and as a writer who's probably like had to research and study mythologies, comic books certainly reflect our modern mythologies.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, I was going to also observe that a lot of movies that are out, we don't know that they're based on graphic novels, like because they're not superhero movies. But I'm going to blank on the name of it. But the Tom Hanks gangster film with Paul Newman,
Road to Perdition.
Road to
Yeah,
Perdition, was
that
based on a graphic novel.
Yeah, I didn't know
And
that.
the Viggo Mortensen film where he was the reformed killer.
Yes, that was also graphic novel.
Which I'm going to blank on. So you know,
Well, that
I
could be
mean,
any Vigo film.
this is true. But so, you know, like the superhero genre, though, has really taken the forefront. I mean, they know they can make money off it, so studios are going to produce superhero films. But yeah, as far as like the whole mythology thing, I mean, George Lucas, that was a big inspiration for him. You know, the hero with 1,000 faces. He based Star Wars on that. You wouldn't know it, but you know, it's the hero's journey. So
Joseph Campbell certainly was an inspiration for Luke's journey, and certainly for Superman and Batman and so forth. So it's kind of like, you know, it's really kind of brilliant. Gary, who's like if you had your choice of any character to draw, like if someone said to you, okay, you're taking over next month for this, who would that character be? If it's She-Hulk, I'm going to kick your ass.
Now, you know who I'd have to say? Because everyone hates him, and I love him, and Achilles busts on me all the time. Cyclops from the X-Men. He's a great leader, and they always make him so boring, and I would draw Cyclops.
Cyclops would be
Because then you also get all the X-Men with him. But that's a tough one. I mean, I like to take anything that would be given to me and hopefully give it a little bit of spin to change it a little bit so it's not always the same old, you know, hopefully I get to draw Superman, make him a little different than the last guy did.
Yeah, because that's really fantastic part of when you have new artists come in and take over, how they sort of like give their own little spin to these iconic characters that we've grown up with.
Right.
You know.
And with that being said, once again, where can people pick up your work and take it for a spin themselves?
Okay, if you go to prontocomics.com.
I just want to remind them.
Right.
We've been
If you
through
go
it
to
before,
prontocomics.com, you'll find you know, that we meet, you know, the first Thursday of every month at Pronto Bar and Grill. I don't even think that place knows that we're doing that. We're just the annoying people that stay till the very end. If anyone has any questions, they can email me at achilles@prontocomics.com. But again, those meetings are designed for new people to come. You know, it isn't like I always make it a point to have us create a certain atmosphere that if you're walking in, that you don't feel like you are a guest at somebody's house and there's like all these people with their inside jokes and everything like that. That it's as welcoming as possible. So we've had some people who just kind of show up. Hasn't
It's
been
a comic book think tank.
but it's you come. Some people bring their portfolio. Some people don't. They just look at what other people have and all that. We got one guy by accident because he just happens to be he eats there.
Well, that's always great. And I really do want to thank you for trekking out, for driving 3 hours in a blizzard and hopping on the 7 train and just being here with us. Thank you so much.
It's,
Thank you.
Yeah, we're so excited that this is happening and so happy that we could give you guys a platform for